There they are.
All right. Hello, Facebook friends and family. I'm Love Coach Scott Catamas, and I am here with the wonderful Trish, my teaching partner and my straight talk partner. And we are celebrating unique family constellations tonight, recognizing there really is no such thing as normal. That's just a fantasy. And so we're going to talk with 5 people that are in really wonderful, beautiful, like all families, they have the challenges, but they're unique constellations, a little bit of a unique look. And we're going to talk about how it works, and we're going to celebrate, and we're going to talk about some of the challenges maybe they've gone through, and it's going to be a really fun show. So, hi, Trish.
Hi, God.
Do you want to introduce your guests?
I don't know them very well, but I will do my best, and I'm going to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves because they're going to do a better job than I am. I just want to say hi to all of our viewers. Happy Friday, and it is so exciting to talk about, to really understand at least a brief bit about what kind of families that we can have, because the world is changing very rapidly, thank goodness, and that there's so much love to be had in the world. And I think that it's so nice that love is being
You froze.
built around community. Yeah, I got it. To be built around community, that love no longer looks like the duality of the monogamous structure, and that we're expanding to something that is more tribal in some ways, or is more connected, is more, loving. And I'm really curious to hear more from Katie and Heather, and we can't hear you yet. Can you turn up your volume?
Well, we weren't talking yet, so.
Oh, good.
You can hear us now?
Yeah.
Well, we're here. I'm Katie Ann, and I've been poly for 11 years and in a long-term relationship, now marriage, with Heather and our beloved husband, Paul, for 6 years, I think.
Well, we've been married for 3 years.
All right. So there have been years involved.
And I'm Heather, and I've been poly for, I want to say 17 years. And I'm actually 3rd generation polyamorous. My grandparents lived with another couple in their later ages, and my parents, unbeknownst to me for quite a while actually, were also polyamorous and practicing. And so it made sense to me later on when I found that out. I'm like, oh, so that's why I feel like I want to expand. And my husband, who he says all his exes live in Texas, he means ex-stepmothers, because his father was a serial monogamist about 5 times. And had he known that the poly world even existed, that would have been such a cool option for him. So I think my husband's 2nd generation poly too.
Great. Well, welcome. It's wonderful to have you with us. And I want to just briefly introduce our other guests. We have 2 Heathers. So not only are we dealing with polyamory, we're going to be dealing with poly Heathers tonight. This is Heather Dudney Stone and her current husband, Caleb. Heather is a wonderful friend that has worked with us before. Her mother, grandmother Flor de Mayo, is a very beloved Native Indigenous elder who's been on our Saturday Night Live show a few times. And Heather's done a wonderful job always of making things happen. And then as we were talking, and she talked a little bit about her unique family constellation, I said, hey, let's do, because I've been wanting to do a show like this. And so thank you, Heather Dudney Stone, for kind of being the inspiration. And speaking of, here is her original husband, the father of her 2-legged children, 3 2-legged children that they had together before she married Caleb and had the 4-leggeds. So welcome, Brian.
Hi.
And Brian and Caleb and Heather all have, again, found wonderful ways to collaborate and to be family together. So Thank you everybody for being on the show. Also really want to welcome all the people in our Zoom room. Want to welcome those of you watching live on Facebook, and especially recognizing that the majority of the show, people who watch this show, either watch the replay on our YouTube channel or watch the replay on Facebook. So you're all welcome too. And Trisha and I both go back, we take a look at questions or comments that come in even after the show has aired initially live. So we really welcome everybody's participation, and especially on a show like tonight. And I actually want to note, I'm noticing that in our Zoom room is Karem, who I've coached before and who I love. So welcome, Karem. Great to have you with us. And maybe Karem, you'd even like to come on and say a word or two about some of your unique. Trish, you know Karem?
I love Karem. You don't know this, but I'm gonna share a story. I dropped in. So when I was working in Mexico at the Drug Detox Ibogaine Center, I popped over to. I was like, okay, this was just tough, and she was the first person that I lived with. Like, she had this beautiful room called the You Are Beautiful room. And she was one of the most loving, caring roommates that I've ever had in my whole life. And that particular house, we called it the Tiger House of Evolution. As a joke, it was the. And we started, like, that shot my life into a whole new realm of, I didn't even know what was possible. Wow. 3 crazy, sassy women living in the same house. And that's where I started to love coach and started to teach Tantra and BDSM. And it was a really transformative space in my life.
And there she is. I brought Karem on camera.
Yay.
Karem was my Reiki teacher too, like 11 years ago.
We all love you and know you.
Well, that's part of the spontaneity of this show. So, all right, let's just start by talking about polyamory, what it is and what it isn't. I coach a lot of people on polyamory. Many years ago, there was a television show on Showtime called Polyamory, Married and Dating. And the show was on for 2 seasons. And both seasons, the primary family that was followed was Kamala Devi, her husband Michael, and their pod. And I was and still am Kamala's coach. And because I was coaching them way back all those years ago, kind of a lot of the word got out, oh, if you want coaching on polyamory, Scott Catamas. So I've coached probably about 100 different couples, families, constellations about open relating, polyamory, everything from people who are just wanting to put their little toesies in the water to people that are full-blown living it, such as we're with tonight with Heather. I should say, because we've got the two, with Heather and Katie. So polyamory, its actual name is multiple loves. And it's really, I think, important to differentiate, because it's people that, if they're really doing it right, they're dedicated to more love for all. So just to be clear, and I'm going to use kind of an intense language, it's not about swinging. It's not about sport fucking. It's about creating more love for everybody. And kind of my biggest rule on polyamory is everybody cares about everybody else. Doesn't mean that everybody has to sleep with everybody else, but everybody cares about everybody else. That's part of the constellation. So with that, I'm going to bring Heather and Katie back on, and Trish. Just ask you to add whatever your thoughts are about polyamory, your experiences of it and perception of it.
Okay. As you were talking, I was thinking polyamory isn't necessarily exclusive of things like swinging and sport fucking, but that's not the core of it. Yeah. It's not about necessarily more sex. Mm-hmm. It's about more loving relationships.
Yes.
usually romantic kinds of relationships.
My husband actually considers Katie his wife, but they don't have a romantic involvement with each other.
Gay.
Gay. But that doesn't mean he loves her any less than he would if they did. We take care of each other, and especially if we eat ice cream, they'll just pass me off to the other.
Oh, that's really cute. That's really cute. Trish, what would you like to say about this?
There's a lot of things that I have to say about this topic. What do I want to say? Good question, Scott. So I'm definitely coming from a very interesting viewpoint of I grew up with my parents being swingers. Sorry, mom and dad, if you're watching. and they would ask me questions like, so, hey, you have better style. Can you help us dress for this thing? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And one of my last long-term partnership, and I had opened up a relationship because I'm a very good communicator, and I was really working through a lot of trauma in this. So it obviously devolved because it's a previous. What do I want to say? I also, hold on. Sorry, I'm not as centered as I want to be about this. I love really how polyamory opens the conversation about multi-amorous or being expansive in love. And I have seen some people, or have experienced some people using it as a negative form, or I'm going to use this term, fuckboy, a way to move through the world. I know, I'm so sorry. And it's not that, and I know that it's not that. And I also want to say that you don't have to be quote unquote polyamorous or be in labeled relationship to have a relationship with multiple people and multiple parents and have a unique family constellation, right? So I would like to just expand the label out to be more inclusive, because I think that some people who have multi partnerships don't say oh yeah, we're polyamorous. That means something to a lot of people. Yeah, I think that's where I want to start.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to bring Heather and Caleb on, and I'm going to bring their other member of their family, the other adult member of the family, Brian, on. So tell us all a little bit about your constellation and how you all do family together.
Do you want me to go, Brian, and then you guys can chime in?
Sure.
Whatever you would like.
Okay. So
but that's the key, everyone.
That's a good
Brian
way.
just gave us the key to harmonious relationship. Memorize
Caleb
those
is saying
words.
yes too.
Whatever you would like, my dear.
I think I've turned to that one a lot.
But I would have to say that I met Brian and we fell in love. We got married in 13 days. To me, he changed my tire. We fell in love. We eloped basically, and we came back to see my mom, grandmother Florida Mayo, and my dad. And I said to him, oh, by the way, I just got married. And they're like, well, where are you going to live? And I said, with you guys. So he's moving in. I went away on a road trip on the 4th of July, and I met him, and we didn't leave each other's side and then we got married. We had the same
we
dream.
never really left each other's side.
We haven't. We'll just recently. And our relationship changed, Scott, after we had 3 kids. We had a restaurant right next door. It's still there next to my parents' home. And we live in their little tiny town that they're still in right now. And our relationship kind of changed. And I think it was shortly after September 11th, I had joined the Navy, and I went away for boot camp, and I signed up for an active duty. And anyways, long story short, as our relationship was changing, Brian and I, I had met Caleb and we were just friends. And that developed into something different over the course of the years. And we decided that at some point, Brian and I were going to get divorced, but we had 3 kids. And we moved to Idaho. And we decided to raise the kids all together. So we bought a house. Caleb and I were in our room. Our daughter was upstairs. Our 2 daughters were upstairs in their own room. And downstairs, Brian had his room. My son was down there. We had 3 dogs. And that's kind of my interpretation. We kind of had to let go of the ego, but we really have a good time with each other. Like, we really enjoy hanging out with each other. And I think that the kids grew up with their dad, which was really important to me because I love Brian. He's a great dad. He's a great human. But this is my like romantic connection, Caleb. And I think it was something that, and they get along great. Brian and Caleb would wake up every morning, and I'm not joking. They would sit in the men's den, have coffee, and just chat for hours in the morning. They woke up every day, and they're just 2 great humans. And a lot of times my mom will say to me when we go to events, she's like the woman that walks with 2 husbands. And it's kind of cute. And the other sweet thing was our son, when he graduated, Brian left to go back to New Mexico, and that's where he is right now. He sees my parents every day. My brother is over there on the property with his partner, and we're just one big family that really likes each other.
Beautiful.
And I'll let Caleb chime in and Brian chime in from their perspective, but that's my perspective.
Yeah, and we just when we decided we were going to be together, I met Brian. I liked Brian. He was a good guy, and I didn't want to come in between him and his children, and he was too good of a father to be, just kicked to the curb. So I looked at it like, this is, he's the kid's father. I'm going to be the stepfather. But, coming from someone who I liked him, I got along with him. So I figured we could probably just make it work, and, took a roll of the dice and it worked.
Yeah, it did work. It was, it was probably difficult at first, like unusual, uncharted territory,
Awkward, yeah.
Yeah, awkward. Awkward's a good word. But it definitely blossomed into a great friendship. We still look forward to hanging out with each other. I'm pretty sure Caleb feels the same. So we just did vacation in Hawaii, and it was nice for all of us to be together again. So it's been quite a journey. It's, not always smooth sailing, but that's all humans, right? So, but we definitely know how to work through things probably better than most people. I think often people don't get the opportunity to work through issues and complications. And sometimes with 3 people, there's more reasoning powers that take place when things get difficult. So I did notice that primarily about our relationship, is if there was a off moment, there would always be someone with more reasoning abilities to step in, mostly Caleb, but as you can probably tell, that's his forte. He's good at it, but we all became better people. And the background for me is I grew up, my father was gone when I was about 5, and he was in and out of our lives very randomly, and so I think most important to me was I didn't want my kids to have that experience at all. So this was the most important part of our relationship, was to have family, for those kids. So
I'm going to gallery view, so all of you are on camera right now, just so you know.
okay.
And I have a question for everybody, including Trish. how do you handle jealousy and comparative thinking? You know, so Caleb, do you find yourself comparing yourself to Brian, Brian comparing himself to Caleb? Ladies, you know, same question. How do you manage just those human moments of jealousy, competitive thinking, comparative thinking, insecurities that come up? I'm not as fill in the blank as the other person. How do you
I'll jump in.
Okay.
Initially, very well. And then I ran into a situation I didn't know would be uncomfortable for me. And we'd been poly for a long time, and I'd been poly for years before that. And my track record was usually I was the one in multiple relationships, and my partners were in fewer relationships. And then Heather met someone interesting, and we've talked about this, is okay to talk about. And so she was with our Paul and with me and with this other person, and I really didn't handle it well at all. And I came up with a term to describe it as the dominant emotion was jealousy shame.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought of myself as, you know, poly, when I started feeling those scarcity feelings, I didn't know how to handle it. And I felt ashamed that I wasn't the kind of poly person I thought I had been. And it was traumatic for me, and I think for you as well.
Yeah, well, it was difficult for me because I got stuck in that spot where, like, oh, I did something wrong. And my first reaction as a human being, of course, is to go into like defense mode. But I'm aware that that's something that I have. I'm aware that that's my trigger. So I had to really like hold that space for her to have her emotions and 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 figure out what was my role in that. What can I, and I basically asked her, what can I do differently? What can I do better? Because I don't want to hurt you. I don't want this to happen, you know. And so I did the best I could on that. As far as jealousy, for me, my husband was dating a very young woman who did not know herself. She wasn't settled in who she was. And that's, I think, the one time, because I'm mostly an extraordinarily compersive person, but she was wonderful. And I love that they were hanging out together, but his energy would be drained afterwards. And so later, thinking about this later, I recognized that it was taking energy, his energy, that I felt like, and of course I don't own it. I felt like it was mine. I felt like that he wasn't able to give me his normal amount of energy because somebody was taking that from me. And so that's when I was triggered. Other than that, he has a girlfriend now. She's an amazing cook. We both were at the hospital with him today. And I love her to death. And so I don't normally have those emotions. I just did when I recognized that something essential in my world was now missing. So that scarcity piece of the puzzle is what I feel jealousy comes from.
No, thank you so much, both of you. And I want to riff on a couple of things that said. First of all, you heard Heather use a word compersive or also compersion. And compersion is kind of the opposite of competition or comparison. Compersion is where we take joy in watching someone else experience love or experience something wonderful. And, you know, it's one thing to be watching your dogs playing and going, oh, isn't it cute watching them play? And it's another thing to watch your lover playing with another lover. So, you know, the other thing that I just wanted to riff on for a moment, Katie, when you were talking about how, you know, I really like how you put those two words together, jealousy and shame, right? I shouldn't be jealous. I'm spiritual. I'm whatever, right? But one of the things I've really learned, both personally and professionally, no matter what our mind or even our spiritual beliefs might be, there's also the animal body, right? And that animal body, that primal, the reptile brain and the animal body. And sometimes we may be wanting to practice compersion. We really do. And we're spiritual and we want to make it work, but there's something inside the animal body that's like, no, right? And it's important to honor that and not stuff it. Maybe not let it completely lead, but to honor it, to acknowledge it, not to shame it away. Yeah. Anything you want to add to that, or?
Well, I think a part of it for me was when I could label it as something that was happening to me, in me, as opposed to something other people were doing. And once I could label it as my own shame, then I could, it was something I could grasp. It was something I could address rather than just that amorphous, that was what my lizard brain was saying.
Well, my husband just showed up if you wanted to ask that question of him as well, but I don't know.
Sure. Is that Paul?
Yeah, that's Paul.
Oh, he's
Okay, great. I will promote him to panelist. Trish, what are some of your thoughts about managing compersion, jealousy, competition, comparison?
Well, it's shifted for me over the last little while. So in my 5-year relationship with my ex-fiance, we were very young, cutting our teeth on polyamory. And he hadn't really understood how much trauma I have had in my early childhood around abandonment. I can't say that he was the most compassionate person about it. It was a really interesting feeling to be able to be in compersion and be fucking like melting down insecure. To just be in both of those places and to have my partner shame me for not being able to be like, you chose this, you said you could do this. Why aren't you, like having these experiences of like, oh my God, I'm doing this. And having like 3 years of rolling PTSD triggers because of this whole experience that I was having in my life. Anyway, from there, 2 years ago, and massive amounts of polyamorous therapy. Like I've seen a polyamorous therapist who's amazing. Her name is Kathy Labriola, and she has the Jealousy Workbook. She's fucking fantastic. If you need a referral, check her out. As well as a lot of embodiment practices and a lot of trauma practices. What I've come to is more security within myself, right? So when I watch my most recent partner, like his exploration or his want, like he's just a polyamorous man. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, this is who he is. I want to celebrate his love. I want him to be free. Like, I want him to be free. I want him to have all the things that he wants in his world. And I want all the things that I want in my world too. That's the cool thing about, destigmatizing multi-person relationships. And now I wouldn't consider myself polyamorous per se. Like solo polyamory for me is really easy because there's a level of disconnect. And I'm really like, I would say that I'm more of a swinger type, that I want my person and I want to go play with all these other people. Like, yeah, that sounds like fun to me. And it's not necessarily what, I could see myself living in community. My parents were divorced. And so I had this really set of like swinger parents and a very set of very square religious parents. My father and my mother didn't communicate very well. Obviously we know this, that they were like separate. But they always, like my mom never said anything bad about my dad, but my dad would say snarky shit about my mom. Now what that happens to do is create a disconnect with the child. Right. So I created all this like internal like struggles, shame stuff. And like, I'm not sure what I can and can't do. Right. Like it creates confusion within me. So as I'm sitting here and listening to Heather and Caleb and Brian and how they chose love. So regardless of whether you're polyamorous, monogamous, monogamish, or unboundaried relationship, anarchist, whatever you want to call it, or just whatever, you know. I love that you are choosing love. You are choosing to walk in and be in loving essence or loving, you chose love. Heather, you, Caleb, and Brian chose love. And I heard that very clearly, that you chose the love of your children and the love of each other, and really chose, when you got into issues, which all humans are going to get into issues. I just want to say that regardless of whether you're in monogamy or polyamory, you're going to fight. Things are going to get hard. There's going to be emotions. There's going to be like, ew, icky human stuff, and you're going to want to run away. And the choice to stay and be kind and loving is a really powerful place, right? So I really just want to, like, for all of our viewers watching, is that the show is about choosing love. Unique Family Constellations is about choosing love, not power or control, or trying to box in what love can be. End rant.
Beautiful, beautiful. And choosing love and finding that balance of self-love and love of others, not selfishness, but taking care of myself while taking care of others. So I'd love to open it up to, and welcome, Paul. I'm glad you're with us. Thank you.
Lola.
So I'd love to open it up to, again, maybe if any of the men, Paul or Brian or Caleb, if you want to talk, because it's easier traditionally for women to make a loving choice. Men, we have a different indoctrination that we have to overcome. So I'm curious if any of the men would like to share how you've worked with maybe any kind of a macho indoctrination or masculine indoctrination that isn't by nature polyamorous or compersive, how you've worked with that. Any of the guys want to? Looks like another beautiful angel has joined Katie and Heather. Welcome, beautiful angel.
I don't know that I myself don't know that we experienced much difficulty. I think we were both incredibly comfortable in our bodies. And so we meshed really well right away. I think if Heather may have experienced more jealousy between Caleb and our relationship as friends, but I'm just joking a little bit. It's more humor than anything. But I think both Caleb and I had our feet on the ground when it came to our emotional systems, and I don't recall ever experiencing any jealousy. I think maybe early on when they were developing a relationship and we were approaching divorce in the early stages, obviously I felt jealous, but it was heading down that path of separation anyways. So I knew that as well. But when we all made the decision to live together and raise these children together, it seemed pretty natural, actually, more natural than I expected, actually, So it was, I don't know how Caleb feels, but
I think we both approached it, from a point of respect. I mean, I didn't want to mess up his relationship with Heather or the children, because that is ultimately just going to hurt everyone. And I appreciated that he respected me coming in and making me a part of the family. We looked at it. I mean, I don't want to say business-like, but I think we all looked at it like we have an opportunity to raise 3 healthy adults versus 3 spoiled children. So we knew that it would work eventually. And it was, like we said earlier, it was awkward at first, but we respected each other, and we allowed each other to figure out what our roles were. And I
didn't experience jealousy. No, we didn't have any of that.
I think I did, but that was when Brian started getting girlfriends, and they didn't live they weren't up to my standard, because I think Brian is such an incredible human. I've got like 2 great humans. I don't know how I lucked out, but I really feel like he deserved, and still really somebody just wonderful, because he's really a good human. You know, he's a really good person. And so I experienced jealousy with some of the girlfriends, but then my husband would tell me, that's not my position, you know, that's not my role. And it went away. But I really think that they got along. I mean, they still do get along really wonderfully. They get along with my parents. They get along with my brother. They're just, I feel like somehow this is how it was meant to be. That I was meant to find Brian to have children, and we're supposed to be, you know, we've known each other for over 25 years. And I was meant to find Caleb, who's my husband, who really keeps me kind of centered. But all together, we're meant to have this big family unit. And I think our kids really thrived from seeing that. I think that they were able to see that you could have a different relationship and really love someone. So.
Yes, Heather, the other Heather.
I want to second that. One of my first relationships with a woman about 17 years ago, her husband and I became really good friends and then became really close. And he actually became my husband's best friend for quite a while. And then that, like, they moved and everything. And I had another boyfriend later who then became his best friend again, and is actually going to be the co-grandparent of our grandchildren, because his son and my daughter got together. And anyway, so, but I love that idea. Like, every people that anybody I brought into my life became parents to my kids, and my kids fell in love with them too. It was amazing to create that kind of community in the chosen poly lifestyle that I have. And I don't know if it's okay if Paul talks, and if he wants to, I would love to have him chime in about that. That's okay. Nope, you're on mute, babe.
He's fixing.
You know, while Paul's pulling that together, I just want to say I'm so grateful that all of you are bringing that up, because there's, I've heard too often ugly judgments that are not accurate about how polyamory or unique family constellations are going to screw up the kids. And I've seen the opposite to be true, because it teaches the children relationship skills, not to look to getting all your needs met from just one source, which is such an incredibly important thing to learn in life. And honestly, most of the poly kids I know have turned out remarkably remarkable, just really remarkable human beings. So, you know, I'm really appreciating that all of you have, you know, raised children and have done it in unique family constellations, and that, generally speaking, because raising children is difficult, and you never know how they're going to turn out. No matter what you do, they're still going to end up on a therapist's couch complaining about you at some point, right?
For sure.
But generally speaking, you know, you've done it. You've raised children and they've turned out good. So, Paul, if you do unmute yourself and you want to speak, we'd love to hear from you. Usually the mute button is on the lower left-hand corner if you're on a computer. There you go. You got it.
I'm on my iPhone.
All right. Paul speaks. What do you have to say, Paul?
Well, today was very nice because I had both my wife and my girlfriend here at the hospital with me, and we had a nice time. And then Heather left, and my girlfriend was still here, and we got to chat with the doctor, and she asked some pertinent questions, and we cuddled, and I got to walk her to the elevator, and it was kind of nice.
The amazing thing about that was they didn't bat an eyelash at the fact that he had his wife and his girlfriend at the hospital.
And where do you live?
We're in San Diego, so that's very liberal. So it's very possible it's a location-based thing, but it's possible.
Yeah.
Even when the chaplain came to come cheer me up, he was still impressed with our loving family.
Well, that is beautiful. That is really beautiful. Yeah. So that's a good segue. Where does spirituality for each of you enter into this picture? To what degree has a successful family constellation working on this been a maybe non-denominational spiritual practice for anyone?
For me, a part of it, and it's partly because of who I learned about polyamory from, was people in the Tantra communities. And the idea, I'm not very well versed necessarily, but the idea that I find to be core to Tantra is that one of the translations of the term is weave. And so for me, weaving together my relationships with myself, with my children, with my partners, with my partner's children, that's the default, is to weave relationships together. And to see that as the way things, at least in my life, ought to work. That it makes sense to me to be connected to the people. It made sense to me to fall in love with Paul. Even though I'm gay, I love him. And in our second wedding ceremony, I remember saying, I'll choke up because I always do, that he's the man that this lesbian never thought she needed in her life. And I do. I adore him.
Beautiful. It's just beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, Karam's on.
Yeah. It's a small
Kate just said she signed her life away.
Oh, they got the house. Sorry.
Sorry, go. Exciting things are happening. That's all you need to know.
Amongst our beloveds.
Amongst our polycule.
Yeah.
I also first heard polyamory through, my parents were swingers, but I first heard the term through the Tantra community as well. And I'm also really big into the BDSM community, which is also very, very poly, and they're all over the place with their labels. To answer both questions that you asked, I was a little untethered this last question, Scott, around spirituality, spiritual practice. So how to deal with jealousy and how to move more into compersion, and how it looked for me specifically. This is how I've done it. So as I look at gender, race, relationships as a social construct, what occurs to me is that it dissolves in my brain, like the ego, all of those identifiers, all of those like personality identity, ego things start to dissolve, and it becomes less about the thing, like you're a woman and I'm a woman. Like it becomes less about that and more about human to human connection. That it becomes less about my skin or what I was born with. I didn't choose. I didn't know that. And so when I start to dissolve those ideas or the social aspect of that, what happens is that I see people in my life as who they are, as they're the love that like builds and beams up from their being, from the core of their being. And I stop looking at them as like, oh, this person has an Audi and this person has an innie, this person's, this color, like it becomes no longer an experience as for me. So this is how it's dissolving in my spiritual practice, as humanizing people, like spiritual beings having a human experience in the most compassionate approach. Now, how I've worked with my own jealousy is by taking Scott's course, and this is why I'm here, is Relationship Essentials in the mentorship group. And, I've taken thousands of dollars worth of different types of spiritual programs and embodiment programs and all the things. What I didn't get was self-empathy. And that's what I really needed, is to understand how to drop from my like chattery ego, whatever I was taught stuff, into my heart and my feelings, and just being able to validate my feelings, but also to even drop into my wants and needs, and to self-source those things, but also get really clear about what I wanted and needed, which now I understand love as being direct, right? I can be direct. I don't have to be cruel and mean, but if I'm telling Scott, hey, Scott, I really like my need for connection and my need for belonging is really up right now, that gives him an opportunity to co-create reality with me, right? Now, when we go back to self-sourcing, which I just did a class on yesterday about self-sourcing your own needs. And that was a really powerful thing for me, is that I no longer look to Scott, or I look to the people that I'm being with to meet all of the needs, or all of the, all of the stuff that I need to be on. So this is my spiritual practice, is love, being love, the radical acceptance of what is, or who is. Like, I want to love Brian and Heather and Katie and Paul and Caleb and Heather as they are, not as who I want them to be for me. And I want to love me for the messy, awesome, melty human amoeba that I am. And so when I get to go into that place of being like, okay, well, I fucked up again, because that's just how humans are, I'm not going to be like, I'm jealous because I want safety. And I love what you said there. I was like, I'm jealous because I want safety, and I'm feeling rocky because something's unsafe in me. Well, how do I self-source that? So I can do things, to get back into my body, to remind myself that I'm not in a trauma abusive state. Like, I'm here with me right now, and I can go take a shower and get into my body, and I can call Scott and be like, I'm scared. Or I can say, hey, I'm in love with this whole panel, and I can reach out to the person who has the most capacity to hold me in my whatever melt. And so I think that that's how I've learned how to move through jealousy, is to by giving myself self-empathy, by self-sourcing, and then by being direct with the people, lovingly direct with the people that I'm in love with, or that I'm in connection with, and really being direct with what I need, without making them responsible for meeting that. Right. And so that, as a spiritual practice, like love as acceptance as a spiritual practice.
Thank you, Trish. I love and honor you so much. Heather, Caleb, Brian, any of you want to share about this as a spiritual practice, or at the very least, as high level growth evolution?
Do you want me to share? And you guys
Go
can?
ahead.
Well, I think, because my mom is who she is, grandmother Flor de Mayo, and she's always praying. She's super spiritual. And that's kind of how we grew up, and how Caleb has been part of the family. Brian's known my mom. I think one thing that my mom says that resonates with me is we all have our own spiritual path. We all have our purpose in life that we're walking, and sometimes it's just destiny, the way things work out. And I think I was destined to meet Brian. He was going to, change my tire, elope, get married, have children. And now we have this incredible, we were married, but we have this incredible friendship. And then I believe just as importantly was how I met Caleb, because I couldn't imagine life without either one of them, or the things that they've each brought me. And I can't imagine, we do like family vacation, and it's really the whole family, extended family, my mom, my dad. And I think it's like what my mom said, is that, it's our destiny, it's our spiritual path, and who we let in our space. And I just couldn't imagine life without either one of them.
One of the things that is really beautiful, because I've had the good fortune to work with Heather and her mother. Her mother's a very well-beloved, well-respected Indigenous elder. And you don't traditionally think of a wise grandmother, Flor de Mayo type person as having a daughter that's in a unique family constellation. It doesn't, obviously it exists because we're meeting it, but it's not how we naturally think. and grandmother being such a spiritual practitioner, and having her blessing and her understanding and compassion of it, really that touches my heart, and it's very, very beautiful. It's really cool. I'm going to bring Karem on. I was so pleased. I think we all got lit up when I saw that you were with us, Karem. Yeah, there's Trisha all excited. And, one thing that kind of comes up is in all relationships, we go through seasons. We go through times where we're really in love and times where we're kind of more tolerating each other, times where we're really focused on the relationship and times where we're not. And Karem, I know you've had unique and different and very diverse relationships. I'd love to hear anything you'd like to share about your experiences and how this has been for you.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Talking to you from San Diego. So first of all, I wanted to say it's so fun to see a lot of my friends here. It's been a while since we've seen each other in person, so nice to be with you this way. Let's get together.
Yeah, we can do that now.
Pandemic's over. Not quite, but almost there. Okay, I was thinking about quite a few things that I might like to share. But one is in the present moment, I'm actually coming back into, I was telling Scott privately that I think one thing that I can speak on is the flow of my life kind of coming into and out of poly living. So I've been in relationship that with someone who was in multiple relationships. I've been just open. Usually when I'm back to solo. I'm just solo and I'm dating and kind of just putting it out there. That's a whole nother panel, right? Can we talk about that sometime?
Yes.
Dating and poly. So not married and poly yet, but I imagine my ideal relationship would be with a home base. I'm a Cancer moon. I want to go all California astrology. And I love home. I love partnership. I do love that. And I seek that. But I also want to play and I want to explore sensually, sexually with other people and to explore what intimacy can mean. I had the experience last year of being it was a short relationship in the scheme of life. It was like 3.5 months, 4 months long. But in that relationship, I fell completely in love. This was not a poly situation though, but just to say, I fell completely in love with this person without ever having any sexual connection. I was ready for it, I'll tell you that. But we waited and waited. And then it turns out this person wasn't actually wanting to go there with me, but there I was deeply in love. And I realized, wow, I've never had that opportunity to fall in love with someone without that sexual component. Maybe the anticipation was a magnet, but so what that, I don't know, it sort of relates to how I view relationship as these intimate opportunities, right? We have this opportunity to share ourselves in all these different ways with all the relationships that we have. And so my definition of polyamory as it's been developing since my divorce to a woman 7 years ago, that's when I sort of started on the path of exploration of it. I've been defining it over time. Like, what does this mean to me? And how do I want to try that and live that and be with that? I learned more recently that my parents were in an open marriage, as they called it then. And that was really interesting to find out. Another family member also had open relating in their history, and a relative, like an older relative like my parents as well. So lived openly polyamorous, but that was like that, they were like the black sheep of the family. Like we didn't talk about them and I didn't know why. I mean, there were some reasons why from the past, behaviors and stuff, but it was never really openly talked about. It was discovered later on. So I thought, well, maybe it's in the genes. I don't know. But so there were so many different topics that were talked about, but I'm just happy to be here, and I can say that it's been really lovely to witness the development of the relationship with Katie and Heather. When I came into more exploration of poly, I was dating another person who had been a former lover of Katie's. So, and it was also with the Tantra community that I got welcomed into. So it was a very open, conscious group of people. Now I'm kind of like playing around on an app called Field, and I'm like testing that out if you've never heard of it. Maybe you already have. I'm new to it, but I'm kind of like playing around with the idea of meeting people who are more alternative out there. Like they're putting themselves out there as someone who's more open, because it sure is hard to weed through the dating apps to find those people unless they're super explicit on their profile. But anyways, I'm going on.
Beautiful.
I love that you brought that up. I really do love. Yeah. Have you ever heard of the term date your species?
Yes.
That's part of that.
Reed Mulhawko. Let's all acknowledge Reed Mulhawko, who came up with that term. We love you, Reed.
Who is an amazing human and so kind and gentle and sweet. I've spent just like a brief amount of time with this person.
Mhm.
What I'd love to point out is that I know the conversations kind of pointed at polyamory, and I also want to just bring it back to that. There's relationship constellations that really don't have. They don't consider themselves polyamorous. That it's not based on that, but actually, like the extended family concept around finding, like, hey, the parents are divorced. And I've heard a lot of people who divorce parents, even though they're not in a relationship anymore, or sexual or romantic relationship, that they live with the partners and their old partners and their new partners, and they find households together, though they wouldn't consider that polyamorous, right? And I wanted to ask you, Heather and Caleb and Paul. Oh no, Heather, Caleb, and Brian. Sorry.
You're giving me another husband. I only have two. No more.
That I really wanted to ask you a question. I mean, do you guys consider yourself polyamorous, or is it more how do you if you were to meet my very square set of parents, how would you describe your situation? Your situationship.
Well, the way I introduce it is, this, because we're usually, and we live in, we brought up our children in Boise, Idaho. So there is a huge LDS community, and we would go to all the events with the children, and it was me, Brian, and Caleb, the three of us. And this is my husband. This is the father of my children. And then sometimes our friends, we do have some friends that have alternative lifestyles, and they thought maybe we were swinging or in one bed, and we weren't doing that. And it kind of threw them off that, oh, wait a minute, you mean you love this person, but you're not sexual with them, with Brian. And our relationship just changed. So I feel like I always would say, this is my husband, this is my ex-husband, the father of my children, and I love him. And we renewed our vows, and Brian got ordained as a minister. He was the flower girl, and he got ordained by the Church of Dudism. And we walked down to Johnny Cash, walked the line. He walked me down the aisle, and we did it in our backyard. And then we said our vows to Ring of Fire, right? It was a family event. And, that's how I think of it, that Brian, gave me my children, but he's my best, he's like my best friend.
Yeah. After a while, if we were all together and I knew somebody and I was doing the introductions, I would introduce Brian as the father of my children too. So
I think people saw the love that we had in our family. And I think it was almost difficult for them to not understand that it wasn't a sexual relationship, that it was a loving family. But they did perceive the love that existed in this family. And so they just assumed that everything else went along with it. But it wasn't the case. And we were entertained by it a lot of times. We thought it was kind of funny, and then they wouldn't believe us most of the time. So it was more entertaining than anything, you know.
Brian,
But it's funny how the world sees things.
I've got a question for you. How has it been dating as you date women? To what degree do you have to manage how they might respond? And have you sometimes had to eliminate potential partners because of their level of judgment or their inability to accept, you know, a unique family constellation?
Yeah, I think a lot of times the women that I did date were pretty traditional, and they wanted a possession, and they wondered why I wasn't giving my whole self to them, which I didn't feel I had a choice to do that, because my job was to, or not my job, but my life first was to raise my children. And if they couldn't see that or accept it, then it didn't really work. So lately I'm more of a hermit right now. Anyways, I'm living in the middle of nowhere, which is great. And if they chose to hang out with me, they'd be interesting for sure. You know,
they'd get Florida Mayo, my dad that looks like Sasquatch, my brother and his partner live there, Brian, and then they get all of us. So
yeah, it's a yeah. I don't know. I haven't been in hot pursuit of anything in my life as far as romance goes lately. Maybe more spiritual than anything right now. That's more my journey, but I'm not opposed to it. It could happen, you know, but it's not my life goal right now.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I'm going to go back to Heather and Katie for a moment. Kind of a similar question. How have you managed when you've met people that you really wanted to connect with, either platonically or romantically, who had judgments, and sometimes very strong judgments about your unique family constellation?
Did that happen? Yeah, I tended to take the date within your species idea pretty seriously. And so the people of all the partners I've had in the past 11 years, only one of them didn't identify as poly before she met me. So all of the others I met through the poly, queer, kink communities, and is just the norm for us, because I'm dating, loving other poly people.
As Katie likes to say, our life is an open Facebook. So anybody who interfaces with us through that already knows our family situation. And if they don't, if I meet them cold out in the world, they pretty much know very quickly up front who I am in this world, because that's interesting to bring up, and it's really fun, and it usually opens people up to share about their own desires and fantasies and pasts and wants, and so I've never had anybody be interested in dating me that didn't know how we operate. I mean, we teach boundary stuff. We're both cuddle party facilitators, and so we're teaching boundaries all the time. So we share our boundaries with people around, like, yeah, let's go hang out, and you know, and this is what's going to happen or not going to happen, and negotiate and all that stuff. If we did want to have a romantic relationship, we have a very unique way to go about that. We go to very open, conscious touch relating events that, where if we do meet somebody, we're in a closed container where it's extraordinarily safe. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and when you're done, you know, there's no attachment. And that's where we get to have all these beautiful conversations and know that we're dating within our species.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know, I love that you brought up boundaries and that you teach boundaries. And of course, obviously, on Trisha and I are both part of Love Coach Academy, and we teach boundaries with compassion. But since we've got two people who teach boundaries, and boundaries are so important in all relationships, whether it's monogamy or polyamory or unique. So what are a couple of your tips for setting healthy boundaries?
Do you want to go over the elevator sex speech?
Reed's safer sex elevator speech, and that's a part of it is just to have
it's the context of if you are going to actually play with somebody or be romantic with somebody, to have that important conversation about what do you need in order to feel safe. That's where that comes from, and Reed Mahalko is the creator of that.
But more globally, I think probably the hardest part about establishing healthy boundaries is really understanding what I wanted and needed, especially because polyamory isn't taught the way that monogamy is taught to us from birth. And so having to find that what I needed to feel safe, and having to accept that sometimes that will change. And part of our difficulty that we had was that during the quarantine, I wasn't meeting anyone new. And we'd been together with the same boundaries for years before, but it changed for me because I didn't have those opportunities for play party connections. And that contributed a lot to my feelings of scarcity around possibilities of connections. And I couldn't have anticipated that. It was a new situation, and I didn't think I needed some of the things I turned out needing.
And of course, if you're poly, like kitchen table poly, like we are, not a relationship anarchy where you really are only in charge of your own boundaries, which is my understanding of how relationship anarchy works. In our particular style of kitchen table poly, I'm not only holding my boundaries, I'm also holding my partner's boundaries.
Yes.
Because like even in monogamy, you ever heard the saying, happy wife, happy life?
Yes.
It's that same thing. Everything has consequences. And if I was to go and operate as if I was solo poly, I'm going to have what Katie calls emotional paperwork from our friend Kathleen Cienfuegos. Emotional paperwork is not something I'm into doing. So I'm going to be extraordinarily conscientious when I ask somebody, what are your boundaries? Here are my boundaries. How can we play where those hell yeses and boundaries intersect?
Beautiful. I'm so appreciating both of you and your teaching. And, again, the hell yes is like, when we're dealing with these tender issues, it's got to be a 100% yes. Otherwise, it's a no until it is a 100% yes. So that's such in all relationships, it's always so important to do that. So I'm going to put it over to Trish to kind of wrap us up. We'll all have a chance to say one last thing, but here's Trish.
I love that you brought in the boundary conversation. There's a lot of the time in the show that Scott is already thinking, like he's like about where I want to go, which I love that about you. When it's not a fuck yes, sometimes there's that discomfort, there's that place, but you know that you're committed, right? I just want to talk about this, and then I have this like really cool piece, is that sometimes the commitment to just being radically honest, again, honesty and being truthful doesn't have to be mean, just putting it out there, but that being radically honest about where you're at and what you need is very helpful. So there's places where I'm a fuck yes to all of this play, and then all of a sudden I don't know what happens, the air moves past my ear, my left ear in this particular way, and I'm like, whoa, I don't know what fucking changed, but something changed. and I think that's really human, to slow down and to renegotiate reality. And I think that even like when you're choosing love, when Heather and Caleb and Brian are choosing to love, you got to slow down and recognize, what am I committed to? right? What am I committed to in this moment? Am I committed to, having this like fun, sexy time, or am I committed to love, connection, intimacy, and vulnerability? So I thought that was a good. Now, what I really want to say about boundaries is that I recently went to a program a couple years ago. Well, no, now a couple years ago. COVID was a really interesting pause and weird dating. Whoa. But I did find someone during dating, and having to conform to someone's very strict COVID protocol and boundaries outside of my own comfort zone, which felt a little codependent on my part, just have to say. That was a really interesting place. But tracking it back, I went to this really amazing spiritual workshop, we'll call it, spiritual sexual workshop. And they taught me something really cool about when you're wanting to play with someone or when you're wanting to relate with someone. This can go across relationship label and style. And so I thought this was really great. So when you meet someone, especially if you're polyamorous, and Karim, I hope you're watching and listening, is that when you meet someone, the first thing to do is to check in with their relationship status, relationship style, and the other person's boundaries. So if I'm in a relationship with Karim, and I meet some, I'm like floating around like Trish does at a party, I'm like, hey, Karim, whatever. And we have some agreements, and I meet the like, of my dreams. And I'm like, hello. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm so infatuated with you, but I'm not going to tell you about my relationship. That actually isn't love. That's not consent. That's not taking care of her. Like, I want to take care of Karim. I love her. I love the people that I love, even if I'm not in intimate sexual relationship. I want to take care of their boundaries. So it's called RBDSMA. And I just want to like drop that in and hold with me here. So relationship status, boundaries, desires, sexual history, meaning, I'm going to cover that, and aftercare. So what I want to talk about is like, okay, so we've got the boundaries. Boundaries means that you got to know what you want and need. You don't have to know everything, but you have to have some container around what you are willing to do in relationship or in sex or in friendship or whatever, work. Desires, what do you want? Like, Karim, I want to just cuddle with you and squeeze your cheeks and pet your head and tell you how amazing you are. And that's part of negotiating reality. Sexual history. This is built in because people are so ashamed and so they don't put attention on this, right? And then meaning. This is my favorite one. So if I go and relate or have sex or whatever it is that I'm going to do with whatever, what is the meaning that you're going to make from this? See, I have the ability to compartmentalize, to go, okay, that goes there and go this there and organize it in that way, but you might not, right? And I think that this is a really important piece of relating, especially in polyamory or in more vast experiences of relationship. It's like, what is the meaning of this? This is with friends even. Like, I really, like, even with friendship, some friends really want more of my time. I work 12-hour days. I don't have much time. If you're not okay with just like a text conversation and a little bit of pictures, we're just not going to work it out. You want a voice message here and there? Like, we're going to do this. But if you want a lot of my time and my attention, it's just not. But is that going to mean something about you? Are going to make my lack of attention mean that I don't love you or that you're not worthy? So, or if we have sex, does that mean that you want more of my time? Does that mean that we are now invested? So what is the meaning of this? And then aftercare, which is, again, some of these terms are from the BDSM communities, which is a very vast and beautiful community around consent and relationships and how people play with each other. I've learned a lot in these communities, but the aftercare piece is for everyone. So now that, we've all discussed, I've honored Brian and I've honored Karim and I've honored the Heathers. I've honored these people with sharing what our relationship is, because I'm not willing to not be in with my children, or I'm not willing to date that would hurt Scott. You know, I'm not willing to put him in any danger. And I've discussed my boundaries around, God knows what my boundaries are. I know what my boundaries are. We don't need to discuss those. Desires, my sexual history, the meaning that our relating will mean. The aftercare of like, what does it mean that if we had sex or if we went on a date, what does that mean afterward? What does it mean if I choose to have dinner with you, Scott? Does that mean something? What do you need after that to feel connected, safe, secure in your own body? And does that include me? Right? Does that include things that I need to do? Because then we are now laying the entire thing out on the table, and I can actually consent to what you need, what I need, and the whole thing. I mean, again, I'm not saying that we can get as we can, there's things that we'll never be able to understand that we can't understand or see that'll come up, feelings mostly, and who knows. but it's really trying to define those places within us. And again, it really works in monogamy dating, as well as polyamory, or as well as relationship anarchy, as well as, you know,
business lunches.
As well as what?
Business lunches.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to remind you, our BDSMA, relationship status, and the other person's boundaries, if you are in a polyamorous relationship, because that should be up front, I think. Desires. Oh, relationships, relationship status, boundaries, desires, meaning, and aftercare. End rant, Scott. Take it away.
It's so much easier to remember than the sex elevator speech.
Oh.
Let's all twinkle. That was beautiful. That was really beautiful. And what I liked about what she was sharing was steps to be conscious, right? Look, we are tender beings, and it's so important for us to be conscious in the choices we make.
Yes.
Whether it's monogamous or polyamorous or even business relationships. Actually, Trisha and I just had that recently where I had a very different idea of what a business meeting was what a meeting was going to be than the person we were meeting with. We had really different ideas about what it meant, right? So meaning and interpretation, very, very important. So our time is almost up. So I'm going to give everybody, if you wish, kind of just your last thought for the night. You know, anything that anyone wants to offer as kind of a closing thought, a closing statement, a closing reminder. I'll go to Heather and Katie first.
I'm seeing Karim on the screen reminds me of how polyamory has improved my relationships with my exes tremendously, because Karim and I share a former partner. And when she and I were no longer working as partners, it shifted very smoothly over like a weekend to beloved ex-partner. And the idea that we can shift a relationship rather than end it. So that Heather and Brian can shift their relationship rather than end it. They can keep what works, the parenting, and they can move on, maybe romantically and sexually. But just the idea that we can have those ongoing relationships with the people we've loved, as opposed to, I have to stop loving them.
My thought is leave room for evolution. Just because you have specific boundaries right now, if you are in a loving polyamorous relationship with a family, and you kind of have that goal of opening and bringing the bringing in of more family, your rules still may shift and change. It's just really important to stay in communication about, I'm feeling like I have some new desires and some new needs, and I'd like to discuss that with you and see if it's workable, if you feel any kind of triggering around it. And so, but just the idea that, okay, we've made this set of rules, which I did at one time, and I learned not to do that. I mean, we had diagrams, right? But then 2020 happens and it's like, okay, this stuff isn't working with what's going on in the world right now. We might need to like go back and look at what was going on. And then it turns out that the rules that I thought were so clear actually weren't. So it's a great idea that if your family, your poly core family has a set of boundaries, to go and revisit those boundaries and find out how are people feeling about them, what's working, what's not working, and saying what you think those boundaries are really important, because what you think they are might be completely different than what your partner or partners think they are. So that's my share.
Beautiful, beautiful. We're getting applause from Trish. Thank you. It's been wonderful having you on the show tonight. Just wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Paul. Paul, what are you, but you need to unmute, Paul.
I think this works. Hello. Yep. Okay. I was actually just waving or clapping with one hand. Pardon me, I'm a little bit out of it right now.
Good drugs.
Yeah, good drugs. I just had my nurse's visit, and my cardiologist just came in and had a short conversation and said that everything's starting to look better, and maybe I'll get to go home Sunday. So that's just what I wanted to say.
Beautiful. Well, that's all. Maximum grace for Paul. That's all. Just send Paul some really good blessings right now. Maximum grace.
Yay. Thank you.
Honey. Love you, honey.
Correct.
Love you, Spice.
Which is the plural of spouse, by the way.
I love that. The plural of spouses.
We're making it a thing. Makes it
What a spicy relationship you all have. I love that. It's awesome. Karim, I'm putting the spotlight on you for any final thoughts or sharings you'd like to go with.
I just have a lot of hope and excitement to find. I love hearing the stories tonight of these constellations, and I really have hope for myself to fall into a beautiful constellation of my own someday, whatever that might look like. Right now, it's me and my cats. Love them. But they're not fulfilling me in other ways. So
probably a good thing.
Or should they? But yeah, so I'm just glad that I caught that this was happening. I recently connected with Trisha around, just sending out music. I send music to my friends when I make it, and that's always a good opener to connect again. But to find out that she's starting to do more hosting of these things, really nice to see you, Scott, and of course, everyone else. Really nice to be with you.
Beautiful. Thank you. It's great to see you, Karim. All right, I'm going to Heather and Caleb. And it all began with you, Heather, with this idea for the show. So any final thoughts that either of you want to share?
No, I think it's important to be happy. Maybe what works for some people, might not work for somebody else. And maybe not be so judgmental on, living in a certain set of rules and stuff like that. I think we all have a right to love, be loved, and do what feels right for us, and that might be different than somebody else, and for us, raising those kids and was our first priority, and, and honoring the relationship that we have, for a lifetime.
I think everyone has the choice to not be an asshole.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
I'm going to steal that.
That is fantastic.
What about you, Brian?
It's been a wonderful time tonight. I've enjoyed hearing all about how everyone lives, and it's always an education, and I think we need to keep things like that we always have something that we can learn emotionally, physically from other people. It's wonderful insights, and that's how life should be treated, not from a microscope, you have to open your mind up and understand that it's okay for people to choose the way they want to live. Yeah.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great having all of you. And I'm going now, of course, to my partner here, Trish. Trish, what are your final thoughts?
Well, my first thought is to thank all of you beautiful humans for being courageous and brave and choosing love, and for also choosing to share publicly about your experience, because I think this is how we start to dissolve the taboo around things that are not the same. And I just want to say that it's so, yeah, we're not fitting in the box over here. And I really, it's courageous and it's bold and it's awesome. And I want to thank you. And for the people who are listening and people who are watching, what I want to share with you is, and I've said this before multiple times, is that changing your idea of what love looks like or what can be really gives you an expanded capacity at having more love in your life. Like, you don't have to be polyamorous. You don't have to, have an alternative relationship. It's not about that. Again, my new definition for the last 2 years is the radical acceptance of what is. And whoever shows up in my life, how can I love them deeper? How can I love you deeper? And I know that inside of me, whatever comes up, who's feeling the feelings, I'm feeling the feelings. So who's that experiencing whatever it is that's me. That's an internal process that I get to look at, and I get to love me there more deeply too. So if we can start to expand our vision or our view or our understanding of what love can look like and build systems within ourselves, that we can really show up and be in deep loving connection, right? Like I mean, I want more connection and love in my life. I would love to have more relationships that transition into deep friendships. I don't want to lose the people that I've loved, right? And as we start to understand that people aren't possessions or people aren't needing certain needs, that we love them for them and not what they can do for us, which is so humanizing. The other way is kind of objectifying if we want to get real with it. So again, choose love here and choose love out there.
Beautiful. One of the people in our Zoom room, Mark, wrote something really lovely that I want to read. And hopefully this is how our viewers, hopefully Mark is speaking for all of our viewers. Mark writes, "This has been a great conversation. When people fall in love, the whole universe becomes a better place. Love is the evolutionary power for all life." Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, everyone. And I just want to acknowledge that when we can reduce judgment, notice our judgments. Oh, there I go again. I'm judging. And practice, Trisha used 2 words that are like my favorite words: radical acceptance. Radical acceptance. And if you really study all great spiritual teachers, the ones that last, that's what they actually usually act out in their life, is radical acceptance of what is. And that's the great non-denominational spiritual practice that I think is really underlying in the foundation of these beautiful souls that we met tonight. So I'm going to put the spot or go to gallery view just so we can see everybody one last time. Thank you, everybody. This was a really lovely show. And I'm really grateful to each and every one of you. And may we all continue to love well. Good night, everybody. And thank you, everybody, for watching out there in Facebook land. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Bye.